One of the things we're very aware of is that the big change in seminary is that 50% of our graduates aren't going to go into traditional clergy work. They're going to be these Christian leaders in lots of different arenas, and we're forming them to be people, to use your words, are able to reflect upon, look at the rituals and practices. How do those different vocations that people have to participate in God's mission in the world in lots of different arenas, how do you see them being shaped by the kind of rituals and practices you've learned?
What I think is beautiful is that the very specific shape of Christian worship already signals that God cares about every square inch of creation, right? So the very story that we're being invited into in Christian worship is one that values and revalues our humanity, our creaturehood, our sociality, our family dynamics, our work, right? And so what's happening is, I think of Christian worship is a kind of imagination station, right? And what's happening is, by being, called again and again back into God's story around word and table, is, on the one hand, I'm learning all kinds of things explicitly, but I'm actually also absorbing a gospel sensibility at the level of the imagination. I'm learning to imagine the world differently. And sometimes I won't even be able to put that into words. And yet what's happening is I am becoming a character in a different story. And it characterizes me because now I'm going to act differently. And I won't even necessarily be able to make explicit why that's the case. But imagine what it's like for the people of God to be regularly and communally honest about our failures, our brokenness, our sin. That's what confession is, right? So imagine that as just one slice or component of the story that we're invited into. And to sort of live through that as the people of God in worship is to let that part of the story seep into me. And now, the beautiful thing, of course, is I never confess where I don't immediately hear the story of forgiveness and God's absolute grace in saying you're forgiven in Christ. Well, now, how do I become a compassionate leader? How do I become a forgiving leader? At least I start by immersing myself in that story, and then I'm reminded every single week that father runs to the end of the lane and meets me, the prodigal son. And every single time he says, I forgive you. I'm not saying it's magic. I'm just saying you're absorbing a story there on the register of the imagination that you might not even realize. And it is one of the best investments you can make for yourself as someone who is sent into the world, as a parent, as a CEO. It might feel like you don't have the 7 principles to take out of the lesson, and yet you are being formed as the kind of person who embodies the gospel in whatever your calling might be.
So you could imagine a person being a manager, a supervisor of a team of people who, living out this story, they are more transparent. They're more... because they've learned how to confess, they're people who are able to handle the failures and weaknesses, so that it's not just talking about moral failures. It's talking about a capacity to be a different kind of person in this place that's more embodied.
And I think you come out with, you might also, you are sent now into your various vocations with, you might actually be able to imagine those fields otherwise, right? Because you can see the world otherwise. So I actually think Christians should be the ones who are the most imaginative entrepreneurs in their areas, right? We're not just maintaining the status quo. We have a vision of how the world is going to be otherwise. And what does it look like for that to trickle down for us creatively and say, I don't have to just take my industry, my field, my sector as it stands. I know that it's actually being redeemed and reconciled, and it's going to be otherwise. What would it look like to imagine that today?